I'm coming to you today from Tampa, Florida. I'm Michael Closen, and the National Notary Association has asked me to talk about the 2020 Notary Public Code of Professional Responsibility, and I'm pleased to do that. There's an old adage. It says that one must know right in order to do right, and I will be talking about the code, and it has been published now by the National Notary Association, and you should all have a copy of this booklet from the NNA that contains all of the principles I'll be talking about today. My book that came out in 2018 talks about all the ethical standards that I'll be addressing today. The first subject for me to talk about is impartiality of the notary. The notary, according to Guiding Principle 2, shall act in an impartial way as an impartial witness. The words are impartial witness. Now, don't take that literally. A notary is more than just a witness. The notary is an objective, unbiased, impartial public official. That's critical. Ordinary witnesses are not public officials. A notary is a commissioned public official whose responsibility is to be there to oversee, supervise, regulate the notarization process. I often compare being a notary to being an umpire in a baseball game or a referee in a basketball game. But the critical thing about being a notary and about being a referee is that you are in charge. From the moment the notarization begins until the last moment at the end of the notarization, the notary is in charge throughout the whole process. And throughout the whole process, the notary must be objective, neutral, impartial. First of all, consider a situation where you have signed a document that needs to be notarized. As a notary, you would not be impartial if you attempted to notarize a document that you had signed. Another example is a situation where a document might name you as a party somehow. Even though you're not going to sign the document, even though your signature won't be notarized, if your name appears in the document as any kind of party in interest, even as the party who might have drafted or written the document, you should not be notarizing it because you have that bit of interest in the validity of that document. And that interest disqualifies you from being impartial. Guiding Principle 2, subpart 2B1 says, the notary shall not perform a notarial act on a document that the notary has signed as an interested party. 2B2 says, the notary shall not perform a notarial act on a document that the notary has co-signed. So even if there are two signers, the notarization is for the one, but the co-signer is also the notary. The notary ought not to be notarizing the document, even though his or her signature is not the one that's going to be notarized. It's going to be the notarization for the other co-signer. Notary should not notarize if there's a direct or indirect interest in the document. The other conflict of interest point is when notaries are brought instruments by family members. In most states in the United States, notaries are not prohibited by statute from notarizing for their family members. But in the Code of Professional Responsibility, we have urged notaries not to notarize for any known family members. Two features of that statement should be mentioned. One is this applies to known family members. If someone comes to you, a stranger, you're not familiar with them, you notarize for them and later find out that that party was a family member, a distant family member of yours, that doesn't violate the Code of Professional Responsibility, because the notary did not know of, was not aware of the family relationship. And if you don't know about it, you're not going to be influenced by it. There won't be that conflict of interest. Guiding Principle 2 that I want to address, no improper gain should come from your service as a notary. The fee, we're talking about more than the notary fee that you are entitled to charge for your service. Let's say that a party comes to you with an important business document and that in perusing it, you learn some information about the business or the business transaction. This is a document for the purchase of real estate or commercial property. Or during the discussion with the document signer volunteers some information in the course of your discussion that is valuable. The notary cannot take information that the notary learns in the course of the notarization and use it for the notary's own benefit. The notary can't run out and buy the property out from under the document signer before they manage to complete the transaction. The notary cannot use the customer information that might be contained in a document to go out and solicit business from customers who would have been dealing with the document signer or the principal to that notarization. So the notary is not permitted. This is part of the notion of confidentiality. Matters that are contained in the documents and the discussion with the parties during a notarization cannot be used by the notary for the notary's own financial gain of any kind. The other third and final point is the one about notary fees. Notaries are not allowed to charge fees above and beyond the fees that are contained in the notary statute and allowed by the notary statute. Now, most states have mandatory maximum notary fees, but a lot of states do not. And in those states, notaries are allowed to charge up to a reasonable fee. The notary cannot charge more than that reasonable fee. The other thing that notaries can do is to charge fees for other services in connection with the notarization, a travel fee, perhaps. I want to take an aside for a moment. As a footnote to all of this, we are in the process right now of finishing the 2022 Model Notary Act. We're revising the Model Notary Act at the National Notary Association. And with the 2022 Model Notary Act, there are going to be a number of important changes. You want to be sure later this year to get a copy of that new 2022 Model Notary Act. One of the sections where there are a number of changes is the chapter about notary fees. And in the new statute, we address fees for things like travel, fees for technology services in this day of electronic and online notarizations. Notaries are allowed to charge fees that include the costs that they have incurred in order to acquire and use electronic systems to perform electronic notarizations. So these associated fees are permissible. Travel time, electronic systems fees. Some states allow for administrative or clerical fees to be charged by notaries as well. But, and this is the big qualification, those fees cannot be more than reasonable fees. Notaries are not allowed to gouge customers. They're not allowed to overcharge in such a way as to circumvent the maximum notary fee statutes. If we allowed unlimited ancillary fees to be charged, these maximum notary fee statutes would be rendered moot. They would be meaningless if we were to allow that. Each of the points that I've talked about could be the subject of an entire hour-long program at the conference, and that still wouldn't be enough time to handle it. It's important that you get a copy of the Code of Professional Responsibility. It's many pages long, and the comments to each provision are very important for you to read so that you'll have a better understanding of the provisions. There's another old adage that I'm going to end with here. That adage is that identifying a weakness is the beginning of a strength. If you haven't thought a whole lot about these professional ethics issues, about conflicts of interest and other types of ethical and professional responsibilities, It's important that you be here, important that you look at the 2020 Code of Professional Responsibility, because if you identify this as a weakness, it's now become a strength that you're thinking about, a strength because you're learning about it, and a strength because you'll abide by the professional standards for having concerns around conflicts of interest and impartiality.